All right, so how do we measure growth in the economy? GDP. What is GDP, first of all?
Gross domestic product.
Gross domestic product. Please realize that that's talking about just domestically produced goods. Right? GDP is the value of all produced goods and services in an economy over a given year. Realize it's produced. So inventories take effect as soon as it's made. So what might we think is GDP, but it is actually not? Second-hand goods. And second-hand can mean a lot of different things, right? Second-hand could be parts of a product that are used to finish something, or it could also mean used goods. Don't forget that. What else? Transfer payments. Please realize that these transfer payments are government-only payments, right? Okay? Government payments for what I'll call non-work. In theory, your retirement is because you did work, but now that you're not working, theoretically Social Security transfer items.
The book called it entitlements. Is that basically
Same thing. Yep. All the entitlement payments that we have. Regardless of the fact that we put money into Social Security, apparently getting it back is an entitlement.
Or if you retire from a government position, that's
The pension that you get from the government position, that's an entitlement. You shouldn't really get it. You're entitling yourself to it. Shame on you. You should keep working until you die. Remember, that's the way that you really
taken away from the GDP.
That's right. You're taken away from GDP every time you retire. Shame on you, you non-American you. What else?
Intermediate goods.
Well, we'll put those in here with secondhand. Let's call them intermediate too. They're kind of all in the same boat.
Illegal.
Illegal,
Black market.
black market stuff, non-traced goods. So anything non-tracked. So illegal could mean you stole it, right? Stealing stuff is non-tracked purchases. Same as working under the table, getting paid for doing work but not tracking it with the government, right? So getting cash under the table, that's also technically illegal and not adding to GDP.
So bartering is considered an illegal activity?
You could almost put it up in there, yeah.
Yeah, because I think there's barter laws that prevent.
Yeah, the whole point is because the government wants its share. Or the real reason why is because the government wants to track it, measure it, and make sure that it shows that our country is great. Right? When you guys barter and don't tell the government about it, you're cheating you're cheating the country out of being the best country in the world. So just quit.
No.
All right, so
Interest income.
yeah, be careful with that one, right? So government interest payments. Government interest payments are not a part of GDP. Please note that private interest is GDP, right? That's one of those tricky ones. That's one of those margin ones where if someone tells you you received an interest payment, you actually have to ask them, well, who gave you that interest payment? Was it an interest payment from a bank? When your bank pays you interest for investing your money, that's GDP. When the government pays you money for investing in the government, then it's not. Then it's a transfer payment. That's the government giving you money for doing nothing. Shame on you for investing in this country. But it's just not productive. That's the idea behind it. All right. So that one, be cautious of that one. That's the sort of thing that I might try and trick you on a test or a quiz or something like that. So be careful. All right.
So if they make you claim it on your income tax,
That's not a guarantee that it's GDP, because you have to declare interest you earn on government bonds as interest.
what if it's a dividend?
Same thing.
I mean, that's money you earn.
That's okay. Dividends, as long as it's a dividend from a private industry, then it's income, then it's a part of GDP.
I don't know that there's any dividends that the government would pay anyway.
Well, I mean, U.S. savings bonds, but there isn't a,
That's an interest.
true, that's an interest payment,
Yeah.
yeah, generally speaking. So, just be a little bit cautious of those, right? Those are the little tricky ones. And those government level ones go all the way down, right? So if you buy a county level bond purchase, that's gonna pay you a certain amount of interest. Same sort of thing. County bonds that you may purchase are also transfer payments at the county level. It doesn't matter what the level of government is. It could be federal, it could be state, it could be local, it could be, whatever, okay? So, just be cautious of which ones are and which ones aren't, all right? Circular flow, what are the four corners of the circle?
Product market, businesses, factory market, household.
Product market, businesses, households, factor market. Which way does the money flow?
Counterclockwise.
Right, the money flows this way. And I always like to use products and household markets as the basis, right? Because when you go to buy stuff, you, from your household, take money up to the product market to buy things. So that's the way the money has to flow. And once you start the flow, the flow has to stay the same. Going the other direction,
Correct. Good.
yeah, the goods and services. All right, and again, remember that this is how the flow works. Any breakdown in this flow, troubles in the economy, right? Formula for GDP?
C plus I plus G plus X minus
What is C?
M. Consumption. Consumer goods.
Yeah, consumer spending. What's I? Business investment. What's G?
Government.
Government spending. What's X?
Exports.
Exports. And what's M?
Imports.
Imports. Why did I put a star next to imports?
Subtract it first.
Alright, it's the only one that's got a minus sign. It's the only one that when it gets bigger, yeah, it's actually worse for the economy, right? The more money we're sending out to the foreign countries, the less we're spending on our own. So it's a whammy, right? So that's money that's leaving our circular flow, that's bad. Alright, so, I suppose I should have done one more. How do we calculate real GDP? What do we have to take into account?
Nominal
Nominal
GDP,
GDP.
GDP chain index.
Yeah, the chain index, right? GDP chain index
Multiplied by 100.
times 100 because this is generally a percent. It's how much inflation there is over all goods and services throughout the entire country or the entire market that we're working off of, all right? Again, just realize that we do normalize for GDP for overinflation, so that just because prices go up doesn't necessarily mean that we are producing more, right? I mean, there has to be some level of reality in our production growth. Again, basing all of this crap on reality sort of makes it a little silly, but it's still there. Realize that inflation's a part of the game and you have to take it into account. Alright. That's essentially Chapter 11. Was there any questions on the Chapter 11 homework? That's Chapter 12. We'll get there.
12H, air and water pollution increase.
I had number 6.
12H, air and water pollution increase. If you have more pollution, note that they didn't say anything about cleaning it up.
It doesn't cost anything.
Doesn't cost anything.
There's
No value.
There's no money involved. If there's no money involved, it ain't GDP. So that should give you a hint as to what happens with 12B too, right? So if there's no dollar signs in there, there's definitely no GDP. That's always the way it works, folks. Okay? So theoretically inside of here, non-monetary transactions are also sort of built into this, right? This bartering thing, same sort of stuff, right? In theory, Juanita's potentially cooking, but she get paid for it? Not in any real sense.
Number 12, D.
What letter?
D.
As a dog?
Yep.
What does stock represent?
Used to.
But hang on. What does stock represent?
Share in a company.
Ownership. If I own something and then I sell it to someone else, that would be like me taking this used pen and selling it to Kiana here. Would we be generating any GDP by doing that? Stocks and bond sales, folks? Doesn't mean diddly squat. All those investment bankers out there that are buying stock at $3 a share and selling them for $300 a share, yes, they're making loads of money. But it's not GDP, folks.
It's only their GDP.
That's right. It's massive income for them, but it's not income.
It's like most bartering that gets done is for services.
Yeah, uh-huh.
And really, it's like, there's no money
Yeah, right.
transaction, so
Same thing.
why does it count against, or why would it count for?
Right, uh-huh. Since there's no money, no
Yeah.
dice.
Who you I? Gably.
Yeah, that one, generally I give both answers credit on that one. Technically, if they're legalizing gambling, that's changing something that was not being tracked to something that is being tracked. So often I say that yes, now it is a part of GDP because it's being legalized, but they don't tell you there's not a monetary value on there.
I'm
So
not
if you
saying
just
gambling in Nevada.
right, yeah, exactly. It's like, so really either one, but in general on that one I tend to say the answer is yes, because you're switching something that used to not be tracked into something that is tracked, which will make it GDP. But there was no number there, so it sort of bothered me that they didn't say there was, $10 million worth of gambling transactions in this country last year. Except it's probably more like 10 billion, maybe even 10 trillion. Let's not go down that road though. I mean, you guys know how much money the Indian casinos generate, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
I worked in Nevada casinos as security, and I sat and counted them many times.
I mean,
And I
just
have
the
never seen more
cash.
$100 bills.
Isn't it just insane?
In my
yeah.
life.
It's
I mean,
bizarre. I mean,
stacked up
that's
everywhere.
in Vegas too, right? I mean, and
Yeah,
that,
that's in Vegas.
it's the same in all the Indian casinos
And a
too.
big casino. I mean, we're
Yeah.
talking the Aladdin back when they had the Aladdin.
I mean, even though, yeah, the little Ho Chunk casino generates about $10 billion worth of money flowing through its corridors in a year. I mean, $10 billion.
Yeah.
I have a question about number 6. I mean, maybe it's just leave it. I don't know. I'll give it.
Why does government spending not actually equal? Why is not all government spending GDP? Essentially,
Well, I
that's what it's
thought
asking.
That's what it was asking, but I'm like.
Yeah, it's
sometimes I
asking
like to
why
focus
isn't
on
all
it.
government spending GDP?
Some of it isn't.
Yeah.
Productive.
Some of it doesn't really.
Who pays for unemployment?
Yeah, it's money going out, not coming in.
That's right. All right, so chapter 11. Please note that the quiz on Wednesday will include chapter 11. If you are happy with your chapter 11 homework, feel free to turn it in. Somebody's snagging. Just put your name on every page then. Not that putting your name on it doesn't make good, man. I can't read it.
You got a point.
His handwriting's worse than mine. Alright. I have no idea. Somebody snagged this thing. Alright, so chapter 12, the start of chapter 12 is on business cycles. What are the 4 cycles of business? recovery slash growth. Eventually it peaks out after we hit a peak. We recess, or we go into a recession. After we get done recessing, we hit the trough, which is a great word. And again, realize that this is a cycle. It's like a wave, so it's constantly going up and then down, and then up and then down, and then up and then down. What's the average growth of our GDP, though?
3.5%.
Yeah. Average growth over the last, say, 80 some odd years has been 3.5%. The reason why most of us are not, quote unquote, happy economically speaking about the growth we've had over the last 3 years since the 2009 crash was that growth has yet to hit 3.5% in any year from 2009. Not 10, not 11, not 12, not 13, not 14 from year to year. So this is what's causing economists concern, is the fact that we're not seeing the growth at the rate that we are used to. And so they're saying, oh, we haven't truly recovered yet. We got to wait a couple more quarters, maybe even years, before we quote unquote truly recover. Again, whether or not we are going to come back to this true growth rate of 3.5% that we've been seeing in the past, it remains to be seen, right? I mean, would be nice. Can't guarantee it, right? All right, now let's see. So, we didn't talk any more about it other than that, right?
Right.
Okay, that's what we're So, how do economists predict slash explain these cycles? So we know these things are happening, right? Because it's just kind of the law of averages, or the law of reality, right? Is that at some point when you start growing, you can't grow forever. And when you stop growing, what that means is that you've hit a peak and that you're going to have to then go down for a little while. Hence you have a recession. And eventually that recession, unless it lasts forever, has to eventually hit its bottom. That's the trough. And once it's the lateral flow of numbers that really gives us our cycles. Now, the question is, can economists predict? Can we know? Do we know when it's going to happen? Do you think they do?
They could probably try, but...
They try. Okay, well, the way they do it is using what economists call business indicators. All right, so business indicators, they're measurements of the economy. These are measurements in the economy that we, and so that's a royal we, and it's both you and I, use to indicate changes. And really indicate, it shouldn't be indicate, it should be more along the lines of validate as well, right? So think of it as validate as well. And what the economists do is they break these indicators up into 3 different categories, all right? And the 3 different categories are really just there to try and sort of fit into what's going on with the cycle, all right? The first type of indicators, these are called leading indicators. Leading indicators, predictors of change in GDP. These are the ones that economists use to essentially try and predict what is going to happen in the near future to GDP. Now, I don't want you to memorize these things, folks. So please, if you go to page Somebody got that page on them right now? 253. 254, the business cycle indicators. So page 254 shows you what some of these indicators are. So here are a list of leading indicators, right? Average work week, unemployment claims, new consumer orders, etc., etc., etc. All of these things are things that when this number or when this indicator is going up, economists will predict that GDP is going to go up in the near future if this one does. So in other words, if the average work week climbs, economists are going to predict that GDP climbs. Why is that?
More people working longer hours.
More than they're producing more.
Yeah, if they're working more, they're producing more. If there's more being produced, what happens in the circular flow? More money being generated for households. If households have more money, what do?
Buy more.
They're going to buy more things. If they buy more things, what happens?
You have to make more things.
Businesses have more money, so they make more things, etc., 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 right?
So as these go up,
If one of these things is going up, that generally indicates to economists that GDP is probably going to be going up soon.
so interest rates are going up next year.
If interest rates are going up, why would that be an indicator that GDP is going to rise?
They're not likely to spend more money.
It's one of those where it's a little bit weird, but normally when interest rates go up, so is the stock market. At least that's the reasoning behind that particular one.
Well,
Now-
when you think about the way demand is, so they raise the price when they make less, right?
Right.
Okay. So you would think that interest rates go up because they're lending more.
Right.
There's more money out there, so they can spend more. So what does that kind of make the slow view? The same thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But these are just, again, like I said, now the problem with this is that how many of them are there on that list? There's 10 different leading indicators that economists use from time to time. Which one's the best one?
I think they use the stock market prices the most.
They use it the most, but it's the most visible. Actually, most economists have gotten away from using that as an indicator, right?
Yeah, I think that got
Used to
in
be a
trouble.
bigger one, yeah. The reason why, of course, is that most of us have adjusted to it. The biggest one that I like to work with, just so that you know,
Wouldn't it be
is
the employment rate? No. Consumer confidence.
the Consumer Confidence Index. The Consumer Confidence Index, right? This is a great story. And, I mean, I don't know how much of you guys have listened to talk radio or read news
I've
about
heard that mentioned.
consumer confidence, right? They're always constantly saying, well, if consumer confidence is on the rise, we expect the economy to increase. Now, how do you think they measure consumer confidence? You would think it's about buying. This is all predictive.
Well, no, they think, well, are we going to have to worry about having more savings? Or are we relaxed now enough to spend some money?
Essentially, that's what it is. But you know how they do it is actually through a phone survey. The Consumer Confidence Index is done by a government office that calls up 3,000 people in an area and asks them one question only. And the question is really easy. Are you going to spend more money this week as you did last week? Are you going to spend the same amount of money this week as you did last week? Or are you going to spend less money this week than you did last week? That's all they ask them. Pick which one. One of three choices. Quick, straightforward, question, and most people won't even hang up the phone before they get that question up, right? So it's a good survey, good proper phone survey. All they do is they measure how many people said yes, +1 if you say more, -1 if you say less, 0 if you say no change, and then they add all those numbers up and say what was the weighted average of the +1s to the 0s to the -1s. And whether that number is more than half or less than half, that's how they determine whether or not our consumer confidence is on the rise. And this predictor, over the last 25 years, has been the best predictor with a 3-month trailer to GDP. So in other words, if people said for a particular quarter that we're going to spend more, on average, GDP, the next quarter, always goes up.
You sure it's only 3,000 people?
That's it, 3,000 people, that's all it takes. In a region,
Oh my goodness.
all it takes.
What if they call
Doesn't
3,000
matter.
rich people?
Doesn't matter. On average, they call enough people that it makes it work.
I mean, like,
And it's a straight phone service indicator. Now, what I want you to know about these things is please know that leading indicators are predictors. So if I told you that a leading indicator was on the rise, your response to me would be that
GDP's on the rise.
GDP will be on the rise. It's not yet, but it's going to be. All right? Because the next type of indicator is a coincident indicator. And these are indicators that change at the same time. They change with GDP. Indicators change with GDP. And basically this is a validator of a leading indicator. In other words, if the consumer confidence rose one quarter, you would expect GDP to rise, and with it should be the coincident indicators as well. So you should also expect industrial production to be growing at the same time. All right? So these indicators are just validators of the leading indicators. So if I tell you that that a coincident indicator is on the rise, you should be telling me that GDP should be rising with it at the same time. Okay? Because they happen together. And then the last ones are the lagging indicators. And if one leads and one's at the same time, guess what the lagging indicator does? After. Okay. Change after GDP. So in other words, if GDP went up, you would expect these indicators to go up a certain amount of time after GDP has gone up, or to go down after GDP has gone down. All right? The best one of those examples is actually the unemployment rate. It's one of the reasons why I get frustrated when we focus so much on the actual unemployment rate itself. Now, the unemployment numbers, the number of people who are unemployed or filing for unemployment claims, that's a leading indicator, right? The more people who are filing for unemployment claims, the more GDP is going to go down, because that means those people are not working. But in order to get the unemployment rate to actually change, it takes time. If you think about 2008, 2009, when did the crash happen? Right? When did the stock market flop?
2008.
End of 2008. When was the first time that our unemployment rate got back up to double digits?
About last year, midway.
Well, it was
Even if it's
2012.
really getting there, it just means that there's less people signed up for unemployment. It doesn't.
well, we'll get to that.
Doesn't carry the actual
Don't get into the actual numbers. That's chapter 13. But the actual unemployment rate itself took a long time to adjust. It actually took 6 months before the unemployment rate had gone back up to like 8 or 9% from its 4% in 2008. The end of 2008, unemployment was sitting at 4.5%. That's when everything died, right? That's when the stock market crashed 1,800 points. That's when you saw a 30 to 40% drop in all of everybody's savings accounts. It was 6 months later that unemployment jumped finally from 5% up to 8-9%. Okay? It took 6 months for it to happen. That's what that lagging indicator is. It took GDP falling for a good 2 quarters before our unemployment finally adjusted to it, and we said, uh-oh, crap, we're in trouble. And really, the start was back in 2008 when all of those values of our houses fell and the stock market fell and everybody lost value in their homes, right? Their home value went from $300,000 all of a sudden down to $200,000. They didn't lose their job right away. It took 6 months for the businesses to realize, oh crap, people lost all their money. As soon as people lost their value in their houses, what did they do?
Stop spending.
They stopped spending. What happens when people stop spending?
GDP goes down. They don't.
Businesses don't have any money. When businesses don't have any money or they don't have products to make, what do?
Fire people.
Lay people off. As more people get laid off,
Less people have money.
less people have money, so less people buy things, so businesses have less money, so
They lay off more.
Lay off more people, right? And that's what happened from 2008 all the way through 2009. The entirety of 2009 was that toilet bowl flushing of the economy, right? What stopped it? Why didn't the economy just completely tank forever?
Government stimulus.
Yeah, exactly. Finally, in September, Obama got enough congressmen and senators together to say, let's spend $1.7 trillion. And that's exactly when the economy stopped flopping. Because he came in and said, look, you guys this cycle's gonna keep happening. There's no way to stop it unless something else comes in. Or we have a big, huge riot and a crash and we sell half of our country to Mexico or China or wherever, right? Something had to happen. And that's what it is, right? That's the government's job, is to step in when one of these things flops. And that's what it did. And that's why the economy finally stopped falling and at least leveled out a little bit. Took a while for us to finally start to generate consumer confidence again. Once we started generating consumer confidence, then the numbers started to turn around. Once we started spending more money again, businesses started getting more money, and then they started investing and actually hiring us back again, right? We saw growth in the economy from 2009 all the way through 2012. How much has the unemployment rate fallen?
It's not going up very much.
It's not gone down very much, right? It's slowly going down. Why? Because this baby lags, right? It just takes time for the money to hit businesses enough that they're willing to hire. Right? I mean, think about it. If you were a business owner, when you were making, when you lost all of this money, lost all your orders, and people weren't buying stuff from you, you laid people off as quickly as you could, right? So that your bottom line was okay. Once the economy rebounds, how likely are you to hire people back?
Not very right away.
What do you do first before you hire people back?
Get your money back.
Well, but you need to produce products, right? So how are you going to produce those products? What do?
Yourself.
Overtime, right? You give people overtime, or you maybe hire temps, or you outsource maybe a little bit, right? Whatever. You don't hire them though, because once you hire them, what have you done? It costs a shitload of money to hire people, folks. You're expensive. Right? Insurance, taxes.
I think you forgot taxes.
Hiring people is expensive, right? It's the most expensive part of almost every job that's out there. So until the company is sure that the economy has recovered, they're not going to hire you back. They're going to push the current employees to work overtime as much as they can first. And until people start quitting because they have to do so much overtime, they're not going to hire, right? Tends to be the way it works. Right? Why? Because businesses are not stupid. They saw the crash. They saw what happened, right? They don't want to have it happen again, so they're protecting themselves, just like you, right? Good or bad? I don't know. But it's the reality, right? So, it's a little scary, but at the same time, it's just the way it works, right? So, again, these are the lagging indicators. Again, they are pointing out that when these things change, it's usually validating the fact that some of the other changes in GDP are actually true, right? So once GDP starts to go up, was that really growth in GDP, or was it just a fluke or something like that? Well, if you see the unemployment rate go down a little bit, that validates the fact that GDP was probably rising a quarter ago, okay? Now, the lag on this used to be, like 6 months. Given the changes in the economy and the development of technology, this lag and lead time has shrunk, right? It's now more like 1, 2, maybe 3 months worth of lag time that used to exist between these indicators. It just keeps getting shorter and shorter because businesses react much faster because they've got tons of information available to them readily. Right? It used to take businesses a while to figure out, well, how much inventory do I have? Well, in order to figure out how much inventory I had, they used to have to send, 80 guys out to different warehouses and count everything up, right? I mean, yeah, they probably have it on file, but how much should they trust it? If you've ever done any inventory reporting, you realize that the real numbers and the paper numbers, they're almost never the same. But now with really good high-tech computer jobs and computer warehousing and all the ability to track things real carefully, now they know instantly. So when they needed it to have more inventory, bam, they can change it almost instantly. It used to take them 3 or 4 months. These are good things for business, but maybe not necessarily so much for the unemployment rate, right? Because now the businesses are really good at saying, oh, I don't need you anymore, sorry, bye-bye. Right? And as the labor laws become more and more laxed, as we get rid of more and more unions, it becomes a lot easier for businesses to say at a drop of a hat, sorry, we don't need your services anymore, you're done. Right? And that's good and bad, it is. Right? I don't know whether it's good or bad, it's just that's the way it is at this stage. All right? So, these indicators, they have been changing a little bit, but all right, so just know what they do. Please don't memorize the list. Okay, I'm not going to ask you, wait, is this a leading indicator or a lagging indicator? I won't do that. Okay, just know what they do. All right, so those are our business cycles, and again, folks, the goal behind this is tracking GDP because one of the goals of the economy, growth in the economy, right? Tracking GDP is the way we do it and measure it. So the second goal that we generally talk about when it comes to the macroeconomy is unemployment. And this is the second half of chapter 12. Unemployment is a fun thing to talk about, but it is also a little bit scary. So first off, the unemployment rate. Now before we get started, my question to you guys is, how do you think the government determines the unemployment rate?
By who's actually filing unemployment claims.
Nope, absolutely not. Those two things are completely unrelated. Unemployment claims and the unemployment rate are not even calculated by the same department.
Who's employed and I'm just maybe.
Essentially, yes. It's based off of who's employed and who's not employed, essentially. Now, how does the government determine if you guys are employed?
If the taxes are being paid.
So every week, you guys have to pay taxes?
No, the employer does.
The employer has to pay taxes every week?
They withhold.
We get to take
They
it
withhold, but do they
every
actually
year,
pay
every
it?
year.
No,
They don't pay it until at the end of the
They
year.
do it at a quarter.
So how do they figure out what the unemployment rate is every week? They do it every
We
week.
have to break it down.
So how do they break it down? I mean, do they somehow see into the future? Do they make businesses report into the future? How many people did they have hired?
Job centers and places where people are actually looking for work.
Ooh, so they look at job center places. Actually, they don't. Again, non-related department of the government. Good guess, though. That's a good guess. You're getting closer.
Well, it's the same thing as filing. the
True,
claim.
exactly. It's totally different. Let me tell you how it works. The unemployment office that's used to calculate the unemployment rate is loaded with a bank of phones.
Call people up and ask them if they're working.
Yep, that's how they do it. It's a survey.
Great.
How are they going to contact 300 million people?
They calculate 30,000 people in each working center that they measure. Period.
So it's not a very good system.
Oh no, it's a great system. It works like charm. We constantly looking at the unemployment rate, aren't we?
Yeah, but it's not accurate.
It's not.
Well, but that's what we use to determine whether or not we have people working, right? I mean,
But how are
isn't that
they
what the economists and all of the politicians are talking about, not nonstop, right?
Well, if they use the phone
They
system,
don't
how
want
are
a
they
better
supposed
way.
to call
They
homeless
don't-
people?
They're not interested in knowing like
Right, what if someone
their
doesn't have a
vital
phone?
facts.
Unemployed people probably can't even afford phones.
Exactly. But that's how it's done, folks. 30,000 households are called on the phone, and when they call them, they ask them the unemployment questions. So the way so first off,
I've never
it's
been called.
30,000 phone calls, right? It's done by phone.
Is it one of those
Automated reseller, automated
yeah.
ones? I think some of them are now, but I don't know. Honestly, I don't know about that yet. They've been talking about it. I don't know if
Probably
it's
a
been
lot of
done.
people hang up on that.
Well, wouldn't you? I mean, again, though, that they have to get 30,000 responses before they stop. Okay. All right. So the unemployment rate. First of all, it's a phone survey, which should, right off the bat, tell you how wonderfully accurate this is going to be.
That's like a 0.1% of the
Again,
entire
statistics
population.
bear out that this is enough people to call. We could have a statistics argument, but I doubt you want to have it. All right. The way the unemployment rate is done is that The government is going to take the number of people that it finds unemployed, which I will explain how it finds them in a second, and divides it by something known as the civilian labor force. I love this stuff because everybody thinks the unemployment rate is such a really great number, and I'm like, oh, it's the biggest piece of bullshit that's ever existed. It's almost as bad as calculating GDP, folks.
Right there with it.
All right, so let me abbreviate civilian labor force with the CLF so I don't have to misspell it later. All right, in theory, the civilian labor force is really supposed to be the sum of people who are employed plus the sum of plus people unemployed. That's what it's supposed to represent.
Employable people.
In theory, yes. Those who are employed and those who are unemployed. Realize that there are some excluded factors from the civilian labor force. All right? So the CLF excludes these people. Since it is the civilian labor force, civilians, who are civilians? Those are known as non-combatants. Therefore, everybody who is in the combatant forces is excluded. You are neither employed nor unemployed if you are working full-time for the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard. You basically don't exist.
What about the reserve?
Not reserves until they become fully
Oh.
armed.
Have to be full active duty.
Yeah, they have to be full active duty. Once they become full active duty, they're removed from the numbers again. But once they come back, then they're back in. But all armed forces people are ignored. So how many people are employed by Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard full-time?
Oh,
And are they working?
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So if we added those people, what would happen to our unemployment rate?
Oh, it would look incredibly good.
It would be great. So why don't we do it?
Because the people in the armed forces are being paid by the government.
That's some people's argument, yeah. So it's like, well, it's government work, and they're not really producing anything, right? So their employment is sort of conditional, and lots of times it's overseas, and that's not really doing us any good. But the fact remains is that they're working for this country.
And it's sketchy. We might have a war in
Right.
a month or two. You know, lose about half of them, whatever. Well.
But the key is that if we would include it, it would make the unemployment rate go way down, right? So the fact that we exclude them, that we don't allow them in there, it forces the unemployment rate to be higher, right? The unemployment rate is sitting around 7, 8%, right? Well, if we would just include the armed forces, it would probably drop down to like 6. Well, wouldn't that be better? Why don't we do it?
Because it's not an accurate representation.
Oh, exactly. It's not an accurate representation of the civilian.
Although now that we know
force.
that they use phone calls, pretty much all of it. And
It's statistics. You guys believe statistics. Believe me, you've been doing it your entire lives. You just don't like to admit it. All right, guess who else is ignored? Most of you are. Because students are ignored. If you are a full-time student, you are ignored from the numbers, regardless of whether you're working or not working. Doesn't matter. If you're a full-time student, they ignore you. So as they're asking questions, right, so when they call you up, they ask, how many people are older than 16 in your household, right? So first off, younger than 16. You have to be at least 16 to be included in the numbers. Again, if you're 15 and you're working, you do not affect the numbers at all, right? There's no unemployment rate for 15-year-olds because you're not employable according to the government. All right? So they ask you, how many people are 16 or older? You give them how many that number is, and then they'll ask, well, are any of them in the armed forces? If they say yes, then they take one number away from your household. Those people don't exist. Are they full-time students? If there are any full-time students, again, those people are removed. They're exited from the numbers, right? Any of them institutionalized? So if really you're living in a halfway house, but you're just visiting at home, again, you are not included. Everybody in jail, not a part of the numbers. You are institutionalized. Don't count. If you are collecting disability, you are considered disabled and therefore not a member of the civilian labor force. Again, regardless of whether you are working or not working, you do not affect the numbers, period. Okay? All of these people are not a part of the unemployment calculation. As soon as they call and you say that those people are there, they say, okay, ignore it, we don't care. All right?
Would people collecting retirement or pension fall under disabled?
Tired, they're in there too. You were ignored, you are not a part of the numbers. Likewise,
People who don't have homes.
used to be housewife, but that's obviously not exactly PC anymore, so it's called a house spouse. Again, if you are content or if you are being in a household where you are just the household caretaker, again, you are not a part of the numbers, right? You're ignored, you're taken out. Even if you're doing all the things that you should be to look for work, if you are the main household caretaker and you do not have a job, it doesn't matter. They take you out. That's how it works. And then there's a seventh one inside of here, and I'm going to put it in quotes because we have to come back to it. The discouraged workers, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Those actually come from a separate calculation. Okay, so when they call you, this is the first question they ask. Are you excluded for some reason, right? So they call you up and suppose there's 4 people of age in the house. They'll say, okay, how many of them exclude this? Well, maybe 1 or 2 of them on that list are not in your household or one of these, and they're yanked from the numbers, right? Good or bad, don't know, just explaining to you how it works. Now, once they do this, once they agree that, say there's 2 or 3 people in your household that aren't in these groups, then they start asking you, okay, tell me, right? The first thing that they asked, this is to determine whether you were employed. And this is all it takes. Did that first person in the household who is not excluded, are they employed? And to be employed, all they had to do was to work 1 hour for pay. That's it. You are considered employed if you worked for 1 hour. That's all it takes.
In what time period?
Last week, because they do it on a week-by-week basis
Hour
now.
a week?
If you do 1 hour a week, period. If you did 1 hour a week last week, that was it. Now, if you say worked 40 hours last week and no hours this week, you were unemployed this week, but last week you were employed, right? I mean, that's kind of how it works, right? If you worked for 1 hour and got paid, that's considered employed. The other question that you can answer and still be employed is, did you work 15 plus hours not for pay?
So did you volunteer?
If you put in 15 hours of volunteer work, folks, you were employed.
Okay.
What if you say you just worked for 15 hours at home? You could say, yeah, I cleaned my house for 15 hours.
Well,
Then you're the house.
then you're the house spouse. If you're the major caretaker of the house, then technically you are you're excluded from the list. Now, if you made your kids work who are 16 or older for 15 plus hours and you didn't pay them, then that's a little bit fuzzy. But the idea behind it is that some businesses are run by the family, right? So if a family owns a restaurant, and let's suppose that they didn't have any of their wait staff show up for 2 or 3 nights in a row, what does the family do?
It's some other family members.
That's right. You go grab the 18-year-old who's sitting at home playing on the Xbox, and you say, you've got all summer to play that game. Get your ass to the store, and you're going to wait for the tables for 8 hours, right? And are they going to pay them?
Probably not.
No way, man. They're like, look, you get to play Xbox all day, every day. You can work 8 hours 1 week for not doing it. They do that 2 days in a week. Technically, they were employed. Again, according to government numbers. Now, if you say no to both of these, then they ask you one more question, and that's to determine whether or not you are unemployed. And the unemployed question, which is what people often refer to as the reason why they collect unemployment, is, did you look for work? last week? If you say yes to that, then you were unemployed. If you say no to all three of these questions, you are removed from the numbers. You are a quote-unquote discouraged worker. Why did they do that?
So they can only keep track of the people that aren't employed, by the looks of it.
Right, well, but, so these people who are quote-unquote discouraged, right? So they call these people discouraged workers who didn't work last week, didn't volunteer enough last week, and didn't look last week. Why do they then say that they're discouraged, that they should be removed from the numbers?
Because they don't want to work.
Or,
They're
It's
non-employable.
just cheaper, they don't have to spend payroll.
They're retired or they got some kind of,
they're retired. I mean, what's the difference between a retired person and a person who's discouraged?
they might have a depression, so they're disabled.
Well, I mean, yeah, they could be clinically disabled. The same thing applies there. But that's the reason why you have all these discouraged workers who are removed from the numbers, because you can't distinguish between someone who's discouraged and someone who's retired. I mean, a retired person, it'd answer all of these no, right? I mean, unless they're a really good retired person who donates.
I don't
more
know
than 50
anymore. There's a lot of retired people out there working.
Well, I mean, retired means that you have quit working, right? If you're still working but collecting a retirement payment, that's not retired, right? I mean, I know a lot of people who retired at 35 from the Navy because they put in their 20 years, right? They signed up at 15, retired at 35. They're collecting a retirement check every month, but they've got a job on the side, right? I mean, all you got to do for the armed forces is put in 20 years, and then you get a pension. Period. You're paid for the rest of your life. So if you start when you're 18, you retire at 38, you now have a pension. You're getting retirement payment. But you're not retired, right? I mean, unless you're perfectly content living off of that pension and don't bother looking for work. I mean, should you be considered discouraged or should you be considered retired? If you're a 42-year-old man who was in the Navy for 20 years, 18 to 38, maybe you've got a bum knee, maybe you've got, little back problems, or maybe you've got some, maybe you were in combat, and maybe you've got some mental issues, right? I mean, that's not uncommon. Should that person be a part of the workforce?
Apparently not.
Kind of depends. I mean, did they bother to look? If they did, well, okay, yeah, we'll put it in. If they don't the next week, well, then they're not all of a sudden. And that's why the numbers change so much, because this is very fluid. I mean, from week to week, I could or could not be employed or unemployed very easily, given the current state of the economy. I mean, what happens to you guys when you're done being full-time students? Are you guys going to go into the employed category or the unemployed category?
Depends on if we're looking for work.
Exactly, right? I mean, or it depends on whether once you're done, you actually find a job, right? I mean, there's all that's hard to calculate, right? But this is how it's done, right? I mean, and then they basically add up all the people who answered yes to these questions. They add up all the people who said yes to this question, and they divide the two of them. It's a percent, so guess what they have to do at the end? It's a percent, so they multiply by 100% to make it a percentage. So you can say that the unemployment rate is 7.2% this year, right? But this is how it's done, right? And again, the key here, this number, since it's not included, I mean, come on, that can make the number a lot lower. This number, how many people out there have gotten sick of looking and have quit? But if the economy recovered enough, what might they do? They might start looking again. What happens to the unemployment numbers when they start looking again?
Go up.
Unemployment goes back up, right? So these makes unemployment lower. So which one is it? Should unemployment be lower or should it be higher? Depends on what kind of an argument you want to have. I mean, this example is probably the best party-driven example that you can have. And I don't mean party as in Republican, Democrat, but as in if you go to a party somewhere and you want to have a fight with somebody, this is how you can do it. Start talking about unemployment. If they complain that the unemployment rate is too high, you can tell them, hey, well, you do realize that the armed forces are excluded, And if we just included them, the unemployment rate would be lower. On the opposite side, if you have somebody who says, well, the unemployment rate's too low, it should really be higher, you can say, wait a second, you don't include all these discouraged workers. If we would include them, that unemployment number would be even higher. And you can have a fight with somebody no matter what. That's the best thing to have at a party in the entire world. Because why do you go to a party? You have a fight, right? I mean, come on. That way you guys go to parties?
I think that's what we have the internet for.
Oh yeah, true, right? Sorry, these are for making anonymous posts to blogs and Twitter accounts. I suppose that's another way of looking at it nowadays. But this is the classic cocktail party argument that you can have at any given spot and time, anywhere you need to, right? Anytime you need to have an argument, just bring on unemployment, and whatever that person says, you can say the opposite. Because you have the numbers right here in your back pocket. Again, folks, it's all done through the phone. And again, there is no tie-in whatsoever to the answer to this question on the phone call and whether or not you're collecting an unemployment check. Not whatsoever, right? I mean, there's lots of people out there who are getting underemployed checks, right? Who are technically working 1 hour a week and getting paid, but getting an unemployment check because technically they're not employed fully at their particular job. I mean, they can be employed and collecting unemployment. I mean, what the hell how does that work? Right? Well, that's the way it works here. All right, so anyways, unemployment is hairy. It's both good and bad. It's ugly and scary, but at the same time, everybody uses it, right? Constantly. Anytime you hear a politician chat, what's one of the things they're talking about?
The unemployment.
Get people back to work.
Yeah, get people back to work. Early dirt. And I'm like, well, great, just start including the armed forces, and then you can finally shut up. Right? Unemployment rate to go down.
Yeah, but that doesn't put jobs
That's
back
all we care about, the number, right?
on the chopping block.
That's all we care about.
They care about the number because they either need the number to be high so they can justify, stimulus money, or low because they want to not put
Yeah,
stimulus money
exactly right.
in there.
And so what do you hear politicians talk about? They talk about, well, when you're a Republican and you want the unemployment rate to be higher, they talk about how these people are ignored from the numbers.
Republicans never want it to be higher.
Because they don't want to have any more money being spent, right?
Right.
Cut this stupid unemployment stuff off. And what do the Democrats say? They say, well, come on, look at the employment rate, right? It's 7%, but really, if we just included all those armed forces people, it'd only be like 4, 5.5.
That's what they're Republicans.
Anyways, whatever. You can have the argument anytime you want, and that's the joy of it. Now, one of the things that the government also tries to do as it's measuring this unemployment rate is to determine why people are unemployed. All right? So the types of unemployment are the why are you unemployed? All right? So they try and categorize you into one of 3 categories. And give yourself some room in here so that you can write definitions and examples. So the first type is called frictional. And frictional unemployment, these are people who are just between jobs. In other words, contractors, right? If you do contract work, so suppose you put in windows in a housing development, right? So you sign up and you say, here's a housing development going up, 35 houses are going up, and you contract to put in all the windows in all the different houses. One, you kind of have to wait until all the houses are built. So, when your job starts is variant, and how long is it going to take you to put in all of those windows?
Depends.
Depends, right? So how do you know when to start looking for another contract job when this job is done? Depends. So what do you do between jobs? Collect unemployment. Frictionally unemployed, right? So contract workers. I tried one year as a teacher to collect unemployment because in the summer, technically, I'm not employed. So I filled out all the paperwork to try and collect unemployment, but I was rejected and told that I had a job. But technically,